ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another week of Hoops and Homers. It's another good Saturday morning. Hope you had a phenomenal week, and I know you've been waiting very, very long for the very next episode of this show. Hopefully this is one of the highlights of your week. I sincerely hope. But welcome to kind of the middle of January now, okay? And at this point, there's a lot going on. We got a lot of different things to talk about today. Nuggets are on a 3-game win streak. We've got an interview with Kyle Karros as our final interview of the MLB offseason, talking about the Colorado Rockies. And so it'll be a very exciting episode. Hopefully you stay tuned throughout the duration of it. But, you know, as I've been trying to grow this show here on 5280 Media, and this show in particular, where we only have a narrow focus of 2 of the Colorado sports teams that we could be covering, I've been trying to figure out a way to provide unique content for you guys. Obviously, if you wanted to hear people talk about the Rockies or the Nuggets or the Avalanche or the Broncos, you could go to any radio station in the area. You could look up any of those stations on a streaming app. You could go to YouTube and find lots of commentary of people just talking about how they feel about this team. But I'm trying to provide value that you can't find on any other Colorado sports content, and definitely not the national media, which talks about Colorado sports through a much broader lens most of the time. So in thinking about that, I've been thinking about the fact that we are an analytical show here on Hoops and Homers. When we're talking about the Nuggets, when we're talking about the Rockies, we like to get into the numbers because the numbers reveal things to us that help make us better fans from the perspective that we want to be engaged with the team. We want to make reasonable predictions. We don't want to just talk about things based on how we feel. We obviously have to take that into consideration as fans of our sports teams, but we also want to consider the fact that there are very reasonable conclusions we can draw about our team throughout the course of the year, and we can track certain narratives, and numbers are a great way of doing that. And so I really want to integrate numbers a lot more when we're talking about the Nuggets. We've already kind of talked a lot about numbers when talking about the Rockies so far on this show, but when it comes to the Nuggets, there's just so much information that we can dive into that's actually really interesting. And I hadn't ever considered it until this last week when I was preparing for this week's show. But as we're tracking the narratives with this team, obviously they're at a position where they're still a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, despite not having the best player in the league on their team actively playing. This team has so many different things. Things are changing consistently, week by week, game by game. And it feels like we really do have to just get on top of that. And so the best way to do that is by looking at some numbers. And so we're going to do something unique today. I, as the sports nerd that I am, have compiled a spreadsheet. Now, I've made the numbers pretty easy for us to understand. I haven't really dived much into the numbers yet. But what I want us to do is I want us to take a look at some of these numbers that tell us an awful lot about this team's performance over the last week, and compare that to the week before, and then compare that to NBA averages and the Denver Nuggets season averages overall, so we can draw some conclusions about how the Nuggets can sweep the next week of games that they play. That's the question I really want us to deal with at the end of the day. Obviously, we've seen this team win several games in a row, whether it be on the road, whether it be overall. They're capable of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-game win streaks. And so for the Nuggets to sweep a week is something that we should be talking about as fans of a team that has championship aspirations this year. And so this is the first time we're doing this. And so I want us to look at some things together. All right. Let me see if I can pop this up on the screen, actually, so you can look at what I'm looking at. Yeah, let's do it this way. Okay, so we're going to walk through week by week, and we're going to talk about some very interesting things that I noted in the stats. Okay, I compiled this from NBA. It's not hard. It's a little bit tedious, so I made it a lot more easy to understand, believe it or not, here in this spreadsheet. But we're going to take a look at the rotation the week before last week. So obviously the Nuggets went 2-2 2 weeks ago. Okay, they had 3 games on the road: Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Boston. Then they came home against the Hawks. Okay, so they went 2-2 during that stretch. This is the rotation that was used in the current week the Nuggets had, where they are on the current 3-game win streak. We're going to take a look at how this rotation has changed from the week prior. The guys who are in the rotation this week and the contributions they made during the week that the team went 2-2 against some pretty good competition, I might add. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. And so if we're looking at the week before last week, we noticed some interesting things here. Okay, so we'll take a look at the minutes. Who's carrying the team? Who's out there on the court most of the time? 2 weeks ago. Well, obviously, Jamal, Peyton, and Tim are out there for most of the game. Okay. And it's interesting, right? Because Tim comes off the bench. And so there must be something with the rotations that David Adelman is seeing where he's like, I don't want to throw Hardaway in the starting lineup. I'd rather have him just come off the bench, fresh, maybe 6-7 minutes into the game, and sub out maybe someone like a Spencer Jones who's in the starting lineup. Okay. So it's interesting that those three are getting the bulk of the minutes, at least 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Then you get Jalen Pickett in here. By the way, for this particular section here with the minutes, the points, field goal percentage, 3-pointers, and then 3-point percentage, this color scheme is being tied to these averages. Okay. We'll talk about these numbers here in a second, but these numbers right here tied to these averages. Okay. So if anything is green, it's an indication that that category is higher, that value is higher than the average for this collective group of guys in this rotation. Okay, so for example, minutes, the average minutes played by this group, this rotation, 2 weeks ago was 28.6 minutes. Jamal, Peyton, Tim played more minutes than that. Okay, so I think that's a pretty easy pattern to pick up on. But okay, aside from these three, who's not getting the most playing time in this rotation? Obviously, it's going to be a guy like Zeke. Zeke is kind of at the end of the bench, but he's getting some playing time now because Deron Holmes has shown that he's not quite ready for prime time yet. He's not ready to be taking on some of these guys who are playing power forward, center positions, and he's just getting bullied by them. Okay, so Zeke is getting much more playing time these last few weeks, especially 2 weeks ago. AG played the fewest minutes per game during that stretch 2 weeks ago because he was coming back from injury. They were trying to work him in. Remember, he played his first game in several months against Brooklyn that Sunday that the Nuggets ended up losing. So that's why he didn't play very much this week. But aside from that, I mean, you get Spencer Jones in here. He's in the starting lineup. He's usually the one who gets subbed out for Hardaway here. And so the Nuggets have been going smaller recently, obviously, not having Jokic, not having Valanciunas, and then Spencer Jones kind of being on and off offensively. Bruce Brown also is kind of interesting here too, because he's coming off the bench, but not providing a ton, at least compared to the rest of the guys in this rotation. Okay, so that's who's playing the most, at least 2 weeks ago. Points per game, pretty straightforward. Jamal's obviously up there. Interesting that Peyton Watson led the team that week in points per game. Okay, you're playing against some playoff contenders in the Eastern Conference, okay, with the 76ers, the Celtics, and the Hawks, okay? And Peyton Watson led your team in scoring that week. Not with like chump change numbers either. I mean, 26 points per game is on 55% shooting. It's not bad. Okay, so P-Watt seems to be able to step up when the lights get brighter, which is an interesting narrative that I actually hadn't noticed until I looked into this. Okay, you got Tim Hardaway obviously coming off the bench. Most of these are obviously threes. You know, he's taking 8 threes a game. He's making about 4 of them, and so that's where most of his points come from as the third leading scorer on this team. But then you look down here at some of these other guys. Spencer Jones at 5 points per game still feels kind of ridiculous to me. You know, he's shooting over 40% from 3 on the season. Okay, this week, obviously, he didn't have a very good week. Okay, he's shooting 33% from 3 in those 4 games, but overall, he's a good 3-point shooter, and he's only getting 2 attempts from 3 per game. And so he's bottom of this rotation in both of these categories, and I feel like that should change. Okay, obviously, he gives a lot of effort on the defensive end, and you want him to be energetic enough to carry defensively, especially at that combo small forward, power forward position that he's kind of been playing recently. But it feels like this is something that should change. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Bruce Brown kind of similar. Zeke Naji had a good week 2 weeks ago. Okay, 12 points per game, 57% from the field. And he only took about 3 threes, but he made 60% of those threes per game. And so Zeke had a solid week against some Eastern Conference contenders, which is encouraging to see. Again, Aaron Gordon managed to get 15 points per game that week on 47% shooting, but again, he's kind of getting worked back into the whole rhythm of things. So, 3-point shooting percentage that week was not incredible, at least compared to what he started off the season shooting from three, which is probably not what we can expect of him when he's fully healthy and up and going again. But nonetheless, we don't expect it to be down at 23%. So this is kind of just an outlier week for AG in general. Okay. Obviously here you see who's taking the most threes also. Jamal and Tim. Okay. That's pretty self-explanatory with this rotation. If these are the guys who are going out on a night-to-night basis, you're probably going to expect that they're going to take most of the threes on any given evening. So this is not surprising. It was surprising that Jamal did not have a good week from three against those playoff competitive teams that week. But again, some rotational changes were made that week, trying to work Christian Brown back in, trying to work Aaron Gordon back in. And so it's understandable if he kind of felt lost maybe on some of those possessions as they tried to work those guys and their play style back into the offense after not having them in there for several months. Okay. So statistically speaking, this is the contribution that the current rotation gave 2 weeks ago. And when you take a look at the breakout here of the shot types, it's also kind of interesting too, because you see the contribution, for instance, that Jamal makes. Most of his shot attempts are 2-pointers. Okay. Like 60-40 pretty much, which is interesting to see. Most of that is pull-up jump shots. And if we know Jamal, which we do, we know he loves that little mid-range. Usually it's played best off the pick and roll with Nikola, but obviously he can pull up from anywhere, and that's his primary method of scoring. Okay. Pull up 2-pointers. Peyton Watson pulls up 66% of the time from two. Well, I guess he doesn't really pull up though, because most of his shot attempts are actually within 10 feet, less than 10 feet from the basket. That's what LTF means here. And so Peyton's actually getting a lot of cuts, and it's been encouraging to see that his handles have actually improved a lot. I've been listening to a few other people talk about how his handles haven't substantially improved. And every time I hear people say that his handles are still not incredibly great, I'm like, well, maybe, but they're noticeably improved. Like, he's able to get downhill into the paint and convert on a lot of these shots in recent weeks, more than he has throughout any course or at any point in the course of his career. And so that seems to be the primary way that he's scoring, at least this particular week. 2 weeks ago, when he only took about 5 threes a game, even though he shot incredibly well from three, 61%. Most of his shots are 2-pointers within 10 feet from the basket. Tim Hardaway Jr. is the exact opposite, pretty much, of Peyton Watson. 70% of his shots are 3-pointers. And that's what it feels like, right? It feels like he's coming around screens, catching and shooting. Feels like he's a drive and kick pop candidate. Okay. As soon as he catches the ball at that point in the possession with like 10 seconds left, it's probably going up in the air, and it's probably going to be a three. So that's not surprising that Tim Hardaway is a 3-point specialist, and that most of those are catch and shoot threes. All right. Jalen Pickett. Okay. Pickett had a good week from three from a shooting percentage perspective. Most of his shots that week were actually from three. If you remember that Philadelphia game, obviously he had a career night, 29 points, a ton of threes in that game. I think he made 7 threes in that game, if I'm not mistaken. Most of those were catch and shoot though. Most of the threes he made or took were catch and shoot. Most of his shots in general were catch and shoot. And so that's actually kind of something that's interesting to me, because he does a lot of dribbling because he comes off the bench or starts at the point guard position. He's not an incredible dribbler or ball handler, but he's good enough to get it done. And so it's kind of surprising to me that this great of a percentage of his shots are actually catch and shoot. But I mean, it's been effective for him. So I guess that's an encouraging sign. Spencer Jones also takes most of his shots from three. Didn't have a good shooting week like we already kind of touched on, but again, very similar. Catch and shoot is his main orientation with this team. And he's succeeded with it, especially from the corners, right? He's getting those corner threes after maybe Jamal drives and kicks out, or Peyton Watson drives and kicks out. So he's the guy who's going to be in that position to get a decent look from three. And so it's kind of surprising that a guy who's shooting 40% did not have a very good week this week. But again, playing playoff contenders in the Eastern Conference, maybe it's explainable. Okay. Bruce Brown, not great offensively. Most of his shots are in the 2-point area and within the paint. So that makes sense. He loves his little floater. He likes getting downhill. taking it straight to the hoop. And so this is really not surprising either that Bruce finds himself with this type of build. That's just his play style. And then it's something very similar for Zeke and AG. Okay. Primarily taking most of their shots from 2-point range and in the paint. Okay. Because they've kind of been serving as the centers, not even the power forwards, but the centers for this team that unfortunately is very undermanned at the center position without Joker and without Big Val. So this was this current week's rotation's contribution 2 weeks ago when the Nuggets played against Eastern Conference playoff teams and surprisingly went 2-2. All right. Now let's take a look at this week. Okay, so this is the rotation this week. Same exact rotation. All right. But this week was the week where we won 3 in a row. And you notice some interesting things here, right? A lot of the same type of stuff, right? Okay, so Jamal, if we look at the minutes, Jamal still played the most. P-Watt right behind him, Hardaway right behind him. Here's the comparison. I guess we can just look at them at the same time. Pickett got thrown in the starting lineup again, played more minutes this week than he did the week before the last week. Good to see him getting rewarded for his performance. And AG thrusted back up into the top 5 in terms of minutes played with this current rotation. That makes sense. They threw him in at the center position that the last week. I think Holmes started at center the week before, even though he didn't play a ton of minutes and wasn't in the top of the rotation in that regard. So Aaron was thrown back into the starting lineup at the starting center position this last week, which is why he got bumped back up into the top 5 in terms of minutes played. Then you see Spencer Jones here and then Bruce Brown and Zeke Naji. So little shift here. Obviously more minutes for AG. Spencer, funny enough, played the exact same amount of minutes per game this week that he did 2 weeks ago. And then you kind of get something similar here with Brown and Naji towards the bottom end. Points per game. Jamal had an incredible week. Okay, that's not surprising. 34 points per game over the course of this Nuggets win streak. Obviously, he was clutch against the Mavericks. Came up huge against the Pelicans also. Keep in mind, these were not incredible teams that the Nuggets played over this last week. Okay, so we have to take these numbers and the team's numbers collectively with a grain of salt, because going 2-2 against some top Eastern Conference teams holds a lot more weight than going 3-0 against some bottom dwellers in the West and a team in the Bucks that kind of feels like it's lacking an identity right now. But nonetheless, Jamal had an amazing week. Peyton Watson had another good week. Okay, 23 points per game on 51% shooting. He just continues to play incredibly well. The best basketball he's ever played in his entire career. So that's interesting. Tim Hardaway, again, he's good at this point in time for anywhere between 15 to 20 points per game with this current rotation. So not surprising that he's scoring almost 20 points on good efficiency from the field and from 3. Okay, incredible efficiency from 3 at 46% with good volume too, 9 threes per game. Then you take a look at Jalen Pickett. Okay, 12 points per game. Again, less than the average that this rotation has, which makes me feel like, again, he's being underutilized with this current rotation. Obviously, he's been rewarded with an increase in minutes from the last week, for the week before last week to this last week, okay, if that makes sense. So he's getting more playing time, but his contribution hasn't really changed, okay? He's still taking about the same number of threes. He shot a little bit worse from the field, I guess, this week, which is weird because they played worse teams, but he shot better from 3. And so Pickett's kind of in a very interesting position here. It feels like he's being underutilized. And I feel like if the Nuggets just got him some more of these looks from 3, maybe again, taking advantage of this catch and shoot aspect. So Jamal with those drives, P-Watt with those drives, and then those kickouts to a guy like Pickett. I think this is something the Nuggets could take advantage of to get a few more points on a night-to-night basis right now. But again, we'll touch on team stats in a second. By the way, these numbers are the exact same as the numbers from the prior week. I wasn't able to pull these numbers for the week before last week. And so these are the same numbers. So we're not going to talk about this again. They're the exact same. But that's Pickett's situation. I feel like Pickett needs more opportunities to get looks from 3 Maybe you see this number here at 5 3-pointers attempted per game. If this could be 6 or 7, you could probably get yourself an extra 3 to 6 points on a nightly basis, you might think. And that's a substantial amount, Nuggets are struggling for offense without Joker. That's pretty clear in the data, okay? They're performing at one of the best offensive rates of all time with Joker on the court. Without him, that offensive rating has slipped by about 5 or 6 points. And so if you can find a way to get those points back, obviously you wouldn't complain about that. AG kind of got back into the rhythm. Like we said, starting center for this team right now, good efficiency. Compared to last week, it went up a tad. Take a look at the points. They obviously went up 2. That's because he shot much better from 3 this last week. Okay, this was a good week for him to get back in a rhythm, finding his spots from 3. As a guy who he scores most of his points, like we talked about earlier, inside of 10 feet, but who started off the year incredibly hot from 3. So this was a good get back week for AG, starting at center, getting him some looks from 3. And it's good to see that he shot well from 3 this last week against some teams that it would have been expected that he would do so against. Spencer Jones, again, finds himself in this very interesting position, right? Only 5.7 points per game. Okay. 31%, 32% from the field. This is not good. He took more threes this week and didn't necessarily shoot better. Actually, he shot worse. And so he might kind of just be struggling with this whole rotational adjustment. That's the excuse I'll give him because I like my boy Spencer Jones. I've been on the Spencer Jones bandwagon for a while now. And so it feels like he's just struggling to find his role with all this change happening in the rotation, right? Adding AG back to the starting lineup takes away shot attempts from him, right? For example. And so we'll see how he does this week now that this is probably going to be the rotation they have this upcoming week. I don't anticipate many changes here. Obviously, we'll track it. But if he can improve this efficiency and get back up to maybe 35%, maybe knock down a 3 more, 2 or 3 of these, the Nuggets might find a few extra points per game there too. So it feels like Spencer Jones is underperforming because of all the rotational change. And it feels like Jalen Pickett is not performing as well as he could be, even though he's performing incredibly well, simply because he's not getting enough looks. And so, we're not going to talk much about Bruce here. Bruce has obviously been mostly out there for defense off the bench with this current setup. Same type of thing with Najee. Najee had a more Zeke Najee type week last week. And so the 2 guys that we're most interested in, I think, this upcoming week are Pickett and Jones, to see if Pickett gets greater opportunities to knock in more shots because of how efficient he's been. And we're also going to take a look and see if Spencer Jones can just be more efficient with the opportunities that he's been given. But if I had to make a decision right now, I think I would take some of these 3-point attempts that Jones is getting on those catch and shoots and give them to Pickett. Just because Pickett's playing better right now, all things considered. So, okay, those are the individual contributions made by the current rotation over the last 2 weeks, I suppose. But let's take a look at the team stats. Okay, so this is for the season overall. All right, this is not the last few weeks. This is overall for the Nuggets this season. Okay, offensively, they're still number 1 in the league, actually, with a 122 rating. Keep in mind, this is not points per game. This is offensive rating. They're very similar, but the calculation is not as straight up. And so this is an advanced stat. They're still number 1 in the league in this. The defense has slipped significantly. Okay, they're now bottom 10 in the league in defensive rating, which makes sense because of all the injuries, especially to guys like Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon. Okay, but I mean, you don't really like to see this differential here of the 5.5. Obviously, if the team were healthier, this would not be this close. Honestly, I think this would be closer to where it was earlier in the year at 124, 125. And this defense, I think, would be like 10 points lower. Okay, I think this, maybe not 10, but maybe closer to 110. Okay, 109, 110. Because this was a top 5 offensive and defensive team to start the season when they were fully healthy for the first few weeks. And I don't think that was a fluke. In terms of pace, how fast the team is playing, they're playing lower than the NBA average pace by not very much, but it's still lower. And so that's kind of interesting. The Nuggets have always kind of been that way, though, over the last few seasons, even under Coach Malone and the championship team. That was a slower paced team. Okay, so this is not a surprise that we see here. They are in the bottom 10 of the league in pace, though. But again, another factor to consider is that this is the 5th oldest team in the league. So, I mean, they're not as spry as they once used to be, even though you have your top 2 players in Joker and Jamal in their prime. Okay, so this is why the pace is relatively low. In terms of efficiency from shooting, okay, in general, the Nuggets are still number 1 in the league in field goal percentage, over 50% from the field. Okay, and they're only giving up an opposing shot percentage of 47% from the field. Good to see. Okay. 3-pointers made, they're making about 1 3 more per game than their opponents are, even though they're taking about 2 less per game than their opponents are. That's also good to see. It's a good trend overall. This is why the Nuggets are still top 3 in the Western Conference. Okay. Number 1 3-point shooting team in the league at 40.3%. Okay. This is unique. They're the only team in the league shooting over 40% from 3 as a collective, and they're holding opponents to 35% shooting from the field. Okay, so this is from the 3-point line. So that's also good to see. Not turning the ball over a ton. They're top 5 in the league in terms of turnovers. They don't turn the ball over much. This is a good number, but when they play other teams, they're turning the ball over more than those teams are against them. So they're only forcing about 11 or 12 turnovers per game. So interesting thing to track here, but this is really not very significant in terms of their success. They're taking about 2 more free throws per game than their opponents are, and they're shooting about 4% better, literally 4% better from the free throw line than their opponents are. Steals and blocks are obviously not this team's strong suit, so this is not a surprise. It's not a surprise that they're bottom 10 in the league in both of these categories. By the way, that's what the color coding on the team stats means. If it's green, it means they're top 10 in the league in this particular category. If it's yellow, it means they're in the middle of the pack, 11 to 20. And if it's red, it means they're between 21 and 30th in the league in this particular stat category. Okay, so this is the Nuggets season as a team. Now, we already kind of talked about this earlier, but here are the team stats as a collective for the last 2 weeks. So the week before last and last week. Take a look at the week where they went 2-2 against these opponents over here. Okay, 115 offensive rating. So this is kind of what I was talking about, right? Not having Joker literally knocks about 9 to 10 points worth of rating off of your team's offensive rating. And so they really are trying to find, with their current rotation, guys who can give them back about 6 to 8 of that 9 or 10. And we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier with Pickett and Jones. But defensively, the defense was not good against these competitive teams. Again, besides Brooklyn, incredible that they lost to Brooklyn still. Can't believe that. But what you'll notice here is this week, they played with a significantly lower pace than their season average and the NBA average. NBA average is 100.5. That's the pace stat. Okay. Nuggets were at 93.8. So they were playing extremely slow this week, which is probably why they scored significantly less than their season average. But nonetheless, that's a unique outlier. I don't expect that to continue for the foreseeable future, even with this rotation, you know. Okay, field goal percentage, pretty normal. Okay, it's a little bit lower than their season average. They made about a 3 more than their season average while taking about a 3 more than their season average. Still shooting solid percent from the 3-point line during that week 2 weeks ago. They turned the ball over a little bit more than they did than they do on the season on average. Okay, during this particular week, they were middle of the pack in turnovers as opposed to where they usually find themselves at top 10 or top 5. Free throws, about normal with season average. Not shooting well from the free throw line this week. Okay, so that's something they could have taken better advantage of to maybe get some more contribution to this offensive rating. Steals and blocks still kind of where you'd expect it to be. This is not a steals and blocks team, like we just said. But you take a look at the teams they played. They lost to Brooklyn, lost to Atlanta, beat Philadelphia, beat Boston. Brooklyn is not a good team. Okay, bottom 10 in offense and defensive rating. Philadelphia is a mid team in both. Boston has a really good offense, but a mid defense. And then you have the Hawks, who are mid both offensively and defensively also. And so It's interesting. Nuggets seem to shoot well from three, regardless of the caliber of team that they're playing, which is a good sign. But they seem to play slower when they play better teams currently, and they're not shooting their free throws as well, which is not going to help them win a lot of those close games, even though they won both of the close games that they played that week. So interesting stuff to track over this upcoming week to see how this carries over. Something very similar last week, but when you're playing lower caliber opponents, you might expect the numbers that you're about to see here. But some of the similar trends that we noted from the week before last, better offensive rating, obviously, this week. Look, you played a mid defense, you played a bottom 10 defense, and then you played a top 10 defense, but they lost Cooper Flagg earlier in that game. And so this pretty much ended up being a mid defense at the end of the day. This is expected, so that's good to see. This is also expected, okay? Closer to 110 in terms of the defensive rating. You're playing teams that are not good. You played 3 bottom 10 offenses this last week with Milwaukee, New Orleans, and Dallas. And, well, I mean, it's fine. It's all right. We'll take this as a win, even though you gave up an average that was higher than any of these teams' individual averages, besides Milwaukee, I suppose. But it's a win. It's a win. Okay, we'll consider that a win. Still played at a lower pace than your season average. Okay, higher pace than the previous week though, by about 3 points, which is good to see. Playing a little bit faster. The field goal percentage went down actually this week against the worst teams, but I mean, they shot pretty much the same from three, 1 percentage point difference. They're taking pretty much the same amount. I mean, this is an insignificant difference. And so, like we said, the 3-point play of this team carries regardless of the circumstance. And so it's so important that they find ways to maximize that with the guys in their rotation who are kind of being underutilized that way. And so it's good to see that the 3-point play carries. Turnovers were down significantly this week. Okay. The Nuggets led the league in terms of fewest turnovers per game significantly. Okay. I think the next closest team was a team with like 11 turnovers per game. Nuggets didn't turn the ball over this last week. It's one of the reasons why they won all 3. They shot 3 more free throws per game this week too, which is good to see, getting more free throws. And they shot a better percentage from the free throw line this week than they did the week prior. Steals and blocks, obviously, still not great. But again, undersized, and this is not this team's strength regardless. And so it is really good to see a few things with the narrative that we've been tracking. Okay, remember, we've been saying that this team goes as the 3-pointers go. They need to outshoot their opponents from 3 in terms of threes made and in terms of percentage if they want to win games. Okay, both of the games that they lost 2 weeks ago resulted because they did not shoot better from 3 than their opponents as one of the main reasons. Okay. They shot better from 3 than their opponents in all of these games. In fact, Dallas only made 5 threes the whole game. All right. But again, 3 really bad offenses. And so it wasn't hard to outshoot these teams this last week. And so this really brings us to the grand picture overall. Okay. The league average for each of these statistics is the following. You can see this right here. Okay. League average is 105 pace. The league shoots about 47% from the field. They shoot about 36% from 3, turn the ball over about 15 times per game. They shoot free throws at a 79% clip. Most shots are from 2-point range, obviously 59% compared to 58.5%, I guess, compared to 41.5% from 3. And then the league is primarily an inside the paint league. Okay, 42.5% within 10 feet from the hoop. We've already talked about the Nuggets season averages earlier, but just for the sake of comparison, I put them here. You see the season average for the Nuggets, that pace is just a tad bit less than the league average, but overall they're really good at everything else, which is why they're still like the 3rd or 4th best team in the whole league, even though they're not healthy. Week before last, Nuggets did not have a good net rating. We talked about that already. This last week, they had a really good net rating because they played different caliber teams. Okay. Pace went up a tad bit. Percentage shooting went down a tad bit. Free throw or 3-point shooting went down a tad bit. They turned the ball over significantly less, made more of their free throws, and took more twos, interestingly enough. Okay. That's an interesting thing because we've been saying they go as the 3-pointers go, but I mean, maybe they also were working in some guys like Aaron Gordon again, like we talked about, fixing him back into the starting lineup. He's a guy who's mostly scoring within 10 feet. And, Peyton Watson also had a good week too. So that might explain why there were fewer threes taken against these teams this last week. But upcoming, this is what I really want us to do. Let's take a projection of what the Nuggets need to do in each of these statistical categories in order to sweep this week here. Look at this upcoming week. Okay. We're playing Washington tonight. Washington is bottom 10 in the league in offense and defense. Then you play Charlotte. Charlotte, funny enough, is actually top 10 in offensive rating. That's not something you might have guessed, considering all the injuries they had to guys like LaMelo Ball, who's a key offensive contributor for them. But they're top 10 in offensive rating, bottom 10 in defensive rating. Okay. Same type of thing with the Lakers, top 10 offense, bottom 10 defense. Then you play the Wizards again, and then you play Milwaukee again. Okay. But at Milwaukee, okay. Bottom of the league in offensive rating, mid defense. So what do the Nuggets have to do? What net rating do the Nuggets have to have this week in order to sweep? I think, considering they played mostly playoff teams 2 weeks ago, had a -7 rating and went 2-2, considering that they played mostly, literally all non-playoff teams this last week and had a massive rating of 8 differential. I think the Nuggets could sweep this upcoming week with a differential of about 6.5. Okay, if the Nuggets get a differential of 6.5 against 4 bottom 10 defenses and 1 mid defense, they should be able to sweep the week. Okay. Pace. Again, you're playing some pretty bad defenses, playing 2 top 10 offenses, but they're kind of questionable and they've had injury issues. I think the Nuggets, if they play at a pace closer to 97.5, they can find themselves sweeping the week. Okay. Field goal percentage. Again, bad defenses. This field goal percentage really has to be closer to 48.5 this upcoming week. It should be. If they shoot 48.5% from the field collectively, then they will sweep the upcoming week. Same type of thing from 3. I mean, they've been consistently shooting 40% from 3 in recent games, so I don't know why this would really change very much. We'll say that this week they shoot about 41.5% from 3. That should be good enough for them to sweep. Turnovers, again, bad defenses, man. 2 good offenses, though. And so that's something that we have to consider. I think if the Nuggets find a way to turn the ball over no more than 11 times per game, they can sweep the week. If you're turning the ball over closer to 13 or 14 times per game against these bad defenses, then you probably are not going to sweep this week. Okay. But this is probably a good range. It's not going to be 8. Okay. Well, you never know, I guess, but I wouldn't expect this to happen again against these teams. So free throws, they have to knock their free throws in. This has to be 80. If they can just copy the last week where they swept against 3 mid to bad teams, then they should be able to carry here. I would love to see this balance between 2-pointers and 3-pointers taken shift significantly. Okay. I think a significant shift would be something like 53% from 2 and 47% from 3, meaning that most of their shots are still going to be 2-pointers, but it's going to be much closer to 50-50. They have to get more shots from 3 for their catch and shoot guys like Pickett, like Spencer Jones. So this just has to be the case. Okay. If they do this, they will sweep. If they don't do this and it's much closer to, say, 55-45, they could still sweep, but I think it'll be a lot harder. And you're playing really bad defenses, so you should be able to create yourself some better looks from 3. I think that's pretty explanatory. Catch and shoot, like I said, we got to get Pickett more involved. Got to get Jones more involved. And so I think catch and shoot should go up closer to 33% this upcoming week. In terms of pull-ups, Jamal is still obviously going to be a huge contributor offensively. And so it won't be surprising for this to stay closer to 32%. I think that the less than 10 feet is going to have to come down just a touch in order to accommodate more catch and shoot, though. So we'll say something closer to 31, and then maybe like a percentage or 2 for shots that don't fall into these categories. Actually, I'd really like this to be 34. I think if they get 34% catch and shoot and can shoot 41.5% from three this week, they will have no issue sweeping this week against this combination of teams that they're facing. So that's our prediction for this upcoming week. If the Nuggets do this, then they will succeed in sweeping their upcoming week. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my screen. They'll do a good enough job to continue their win streak, and then that would make it what? An 8-game win streak, I think. Yeah. If they can get an 8-game win streak after this upcoming week, they're in a really good position before Jokic returns, hopefully at the end of January, but at some point in early February, very likely, which is exactly where you want to be if you're the Denver Nuggets. So that's our overview of the current situation that the Denver Nuggets find themselves in. With that said, I think it's about time we transition into our final Colorado Rockies player interview of the 2026 offseason. Okay. And so we got Kyle Karros on today's show. I interviewed him last week. We had a great discussion, another great discussion, similar to the first two we had, just tons of great practical knowledge about what it looks like to play at the MLB level, what is different between the majors and the minors, and a lot of different things about his own perspective and approach to the game. And so I hope you enjoy this interview with Kyle just as much as I did. That said, here you go. Here's Kyle Karros. Kyle Karros, welcome to Hoops and Homers. How's it going, my friend?
It's going good. That was the first time I've heard the name of the podcast, so I like that, Hoops and Homers.
There you go. Yeah, we're not just exclusively Rockies on this show, but that is definitely my bent of the two. So got to get that in there for sure. Happy New Year. Been up to anything fun over the off season so far?
I mean, it's been a lot of the routine I kind of grew up doing. Just a lot of surfing, a lot of beach volleyball. That's kind of how I pass time. I live with 3 other guys who play baseball professionally. One who's in the big leagues with the White Sox. The other guys are in the minor leagues. But we pretty much have the routine down of getting after it, getting our stuff done as early as we can. We wake up, we eat, we lift, hit. Some of them are pitchers, they do their thing, and then we try to hit the beach as soon as we're done with it.
Yeah, it sounds like a vibe, honestly. So I assume you're out on the West Coast then?
Yes, I'm in Manhattan Beach, California, where I grew up. Nice. It's always nice coming home, and then all my buddies that I grew up with too. They always pass through back through the hometown around the holidays, so it's a good place to be.
Yeah, for sure, man. Nothing better than spending some time with family and friends over the holiday season. But
it's very nice.
I know, right? It's fantastic. We had a good holiday season on our end as well, so you'll love to see it, man. It's what it's all about at the end of the day. But it is the new year now, and we're, almost a month out from pitchers and catchers reporting. Spring training is right up on us. And so congrats, first off, on making your debut in 2025. Obviously, that's a major accomplishment. Yes, sir. So congrats on that. For the Rockies fans who might still be trying to figure out what your game is overall, obviously you got a few games under your belt in 2025. Who is Kyle Karros? How would you describe your play style? Obviously, we see the stats and we see that you hit fastball pretty well, you hit the ball in the air pretty well, and you're a pretty solid fielder. Is there anything else that people would know or need to know about your play style that they might not know already?
I would say defensively, I think you saw what I can do for the most part. I felt comfortable defensively. I know I did well defensively. I think that side of the game translated, pretty quickly. And then offensively, I'd liken it to honestly my first stint in professional baseball. If you look at me throughout the minor leagues, I kind of hit at every level. I did well at every level, except for my first. Right when I got drafted, I got called up. I got sent to Fresno early on, and I would honestly say my numbers were very similar to that first stint I had in Fresno. It was, I still walked a lot. I still saw the ball well. Didn't strike out a ton. And then I got my hits here and there, but there wasn't a lot of slug. If you compare those stat lines, it was very similar, and I think that makes total sense. Like when I first got called up to Fresno, I was just trying to keep my head above water. It was my first taste of professional baseball, and I think a lot of those numbers just kind of reflect it from a comfort standpoint. And then you get into my next year, my first full season, having gone through a spring training with the team. I think that does a ton for just comfort levels. You go through the whole spring training, you earn trust and respect the guys. It's a lot easier to go take an at bat when all these guys have seen you put in the work, have seen you, go through a spring training rather than you just show up and in the middle of August and these guys are like, who's this guy? Like, it's a lot different taking an at bat in those different circumstances. And I attribute it a lot to, spending a whole year with someone and going through a spring training with someone and establishing those relationships. So then you're comfortable going out and taking at bats.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that's what it's all about at the end of the day, building that familiarity and that chemistry with people so that once you do officially get that opportunity, you aren't starting fully from scratch. You get the opportunity to build on something that's already kind of had a foundation laid for it. So that makes tons of sense.
It's real. The relationships go a long way. And I think that's always something I've prioritized on a team. And then, when you get called up at the end of the year, it's just different. You didn't have the time to build those. But I even know there's a lot of times when, whether it was like Dolander pitching and me playing third, I know personally I felt like a lot more comfortable there because I'd done that. I have a relationship with Doe. That goes a long way in baseball, just where your head's at, your how comfortable you are, that really impacts performance. So I think it'll be a lot different this year and a lot better.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's that trust that upholds all those relationships at the end of the day. So as long as you're building that, that's a good spot to be in.
No doubt.
It's good to hear. Good to hear, man. You moved through the minors last year. AA kind of had a brief stint at AAA. Then you made the majors, obviously. But we as fans make an awful lot about that difference from AAA to the big leagues. So I'm curious to hear how big of an adjustment was that for you, and what's the largest difference from your perspective between AAA baseball and MLB baseball?
I would say it's not as different as people make it out to be. I don't think you're not seeing new pitches that you've never seen before. Everyone's still got the same stuff. I'd say the biggest difference is you get less pitches to hit. So if you miss your pitch in the big leagues, you're making it really tough on yourself, because you're probably not going to get another good one to hit, maybe all night, let alone in one at bat. In the minor leagues, I feel like pitchers make multiple mistakes, and give you multiple good pitches to hit pretty much every at bat. And then I know in the big leagues, there were whole nights I'd go and I'd be like, dude, where was my pitch to hit? Like, where did I go wrong? I felt like I saw the ball well. I think I put good swings on it. Like, where was my pitch to hit? And some nights there aren't. I think pitchers are just way better about executing their pitches. And then if they do make a mistake, a lot of times they make it as a ball rather than hanging it over the plate. So I'd say that's probably the biggest difference. And then for me, I know nearing the end of the year, there was some swing stuff that came up. It just got a little longer, a little loopier. And so I was fouling off so many pitches that I don't normally foul off. And doing that in the big leagues, you're making it really tough on yourself, because those are the pitches, like I said, you should be ending your at bat on, you should be putting it in play, getting a hit. And I was fouling them off and just staying up there. So then I'm having to make swings on the pitcher's pitches rather than the hitter's pitch that he just left me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I did notice that when I was watching a few of the games you played last year. You were pretty selective. You grew in that selectiveness over the course of the year, just trying to see those pitches more and adapt to that particular change. So that's particularly interesting. Braxton said something similar a few weeks ago. He said that pitchers at the big leagues are more consistent than those in the minor leagues. And so you see a lot better pitchers' pitches more regularly than you would. So it's interesting that you guys both noted that. Yeah.
For sure.
Huh. That's interesting. So Obviously, the other aspect of this is the altitude, right? We make an awful lot about the difference that it has on breaking pitches, but it also has a pretty decent impact on fastballs as well. So they obviously, if you have a nice spinny righty fastball, it doesn't ride as much at altitude. And so I guess you kind of saw a little bit of that at Albuquerque for the few weeks you were there. Is that something that you noticed significantly when you're hitting at Coors Field versus on the road, that lack of ride?
I think the biggest thing that I noticed with pitches in Denver, and I talked about this with Goody, is because he kind of went through the same adjustment, is a lot of breaking balls don't like they almost back up on you. So you have to think you have to get the head out more on breaking balls because they're not going to spin away from you. They're kind of just going to spin and stay more true. So that was definitely adjustment. As far as the heaters went, I've kind of always been a fastball hitter. I didn't notice too much of a difference on heaters in Denver versus on the road. I saw something recently, and my road splits were a lot better than my home splits. So I don't know what I'm attributing that to. But I know it'll end up being. I know Coors is a hitter's ballpark. I know I'll end up hitting better at home than on the road because everyone does. But that was an interesting thing that I saw. And then as far as the altitude goes, the biggest thing it impacts is your body, and that was I learned that very quickly. And it's funny. I'm a pretty stubborn guy, and I feel like coming up, everyone had told me like just wait till you're playing 162 games in altitude, like all this stuff and blowing up the altitude thing. And I kind of just brushed it off. Like, yeah, like maybe on like older guys, like it starts to wear and tear on you. But like I'm 23, like yeah, I'll be fine in the altitude. And then I get there and it's real. Like it's real. I learned that within a week or two of being there. The most interesting part is I would go on road trips and play pretty much every game on a road trip. And I'd be feeling great by the end of the road trip and like telling my trainers, like, I feel good. Like, this is great. Like, we're late in the season and I'm feeling strong, like healthy. And then we'd get home and like have an off day in Denver. And I'd sleep one time in Denver. And then I'd show up to the yard and I'm like, oh, I spoke too soon. Like, I'm banged up. This is not good. I think it impacts the sleep. And obviously, sleep does a ton for recovery. But same thing there. Like I've talked a ton. I talked with Blackman a lot while he was there, and kind of, I mean, he did it for so long. He knows how to combat the altitude. So you know, there's ways around it, and there's ways to navigate it. And I think that was probably the most beneficial part about me being up for a little bit is to pick these people's brains, experience a lot for myself. Like I said, I'm stubborn, so for me to experience it and not just be taking someone else's word for it. I definitely learned a ton and have so much I want to implement going into next year.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up that aspect of the impact that the altitude has on the body. I'm a Colorado native personally, and as a former competitive athlete myself, that's not something I really noticed a ton when I'd play here and then go out of state. And so I'm kind of just like, this is fine, right? There's really no big impact on the physical aspect of this, but it's interesting to hear people who didn't grow up here now coming to play here regularly and how they truly do feel that difference. That's really interesting.
I talked to my dad a lot about it as well, and he doesn't know how people spend their entire careers in Colorado, because when he would come and play here, he'd play well. He had good numbers here. But he said his body leaving here was shot.
Wow. That's interesting stuff, man. Very interesting. Dang. Okay, so you mentioned your dad. Obviously, growing up exposed to big league baseball since you were a kid is something that's benefited you at this point in your career. Is there anything in specific that he's told you or taught you about how the MLB game works that you've cherished and held on to?
I'd say the most valuable stuff he's told me, like kind of about baseball, isn't so much about like how a big league game is run or something, but more so just what it takes to be a big leaguer. I think he's instilled that in me since I was super young. And the biggest takeaway I've had from him is he was always very straightforward about if you're serious about this and you want to do this for a living, every decision you make has to be weighed in terms of like, how's this going to impact my baseball career? And I think growing up, that was definitely apparent in my life. Like, whether it was, I mean, first it was having to get good grades so I could go to like get into a good college with baseball. Like, literally everything starting from a young age was, how's this going to impact me in pursuing my dreams? And I'm very grateful that he kind of opened my eyes to that, because it does. Once you have that kind of North Star in your life, and for me, it was wanting to be a big leaguer, I think it really makes a lot of your other decisions easier, because you just, like, is this getting me closer to the big leagues or further away? So I think that was probably the most valuable thing that he kind of shared with me. And I know he kind of lived, I mean, the big leagues weren't really on his mind growing up. His dad was a banker. He didn't know anyone in the big leagues. It was kind of a far off dream, but he definitely wanted to play baseball as long as he could. And every decision for him was like, is this helping or hurting my baseball career? So I think that was really important for me. I still live by that. Any decision I'm making has to fall into a category of helping my career in some way.
Right. Yeah. Because then you become a more complete person overall, right? You don't just fully sell out for one thing, but you build a lot of different skill sets that help you in whatever you end up pursuing. And for you, that ended up being baseball, like your dad did. So yeah, I mean, that's super cool, man. That's awesome. Speaking, I guess, talking back to more baseball stuff, specifically with you, obviously there's a lot of technical adjustments that players are trying to improve on consistently. It's off-season time. Last year, towards the end of the year, it seemed like a technical change you made with your swing was that you started, well, I guess you stopped moving as much in the box. You tried to be a little bit more still. Is that something that we picked up on appropriately?
I don't know. I think, okay. Another big difference I found in the big leagues is that doubt creeps in a lot faster than in the minor leagues. In the minor leagues, I could have a bad game and like I wouldn't think anything of it. I knew I could hit in the minor leagues. Like, I wouldn't start rethinking my swing or anything. And kind of looking back on my stint in the big leagues, I think the one thing, if I could go back and do it over, I wouldn't veer away from my approach as easy as I did. Um, it's just tougher because you go into all these city, like, more people watching, all the stakes are higher, and then I don't have any at bat, so I go 0 for 4. That's showing up on my. Now I'm all of a sudden I was batting 300 last week, and now I'm batting 200. So I think I definitely was not as like convicted with my approach as I was in the minor leagues. And I look back on it, and I mean, pretty much for my first like week and a half up there, I was hitting really well. I was batting like 300. I got off to a great start, and then I remember that we had a series against the Cubs in Denver, and it was a lot of kind of what I said. There was a lot of pitches, like I wasn't getting pitches to hit. I was hitting the ball well when I did get it, and I was getting out. But I was hitting the ball hard. I wasn't swinging at balls. Like, everything was going well, just not statistically. And then, like I said, after being up there for 2 weeks, all of a sudden I'm batting 250, and I've never hit 250 anywhere. So then you start to overthink things. And I never experienced that in the minor leagues. I like I said, I was way more just, here's my approach. I know it works. I'm going to stay with it. And I wish I had kind of stuck with that more in the big leagues, because I felt how it went was I got up, I came in and I was pretty good, seeing the ball well, hitting the ball well. It was that, like, I vividly remember there was a Cubs series where stuff just didn't really go my way. And then I start kind of tweaking some things, changing some things, and then kind of let that snowball for longer than I should have. And then near the end, once we had like a week left, I think we went to Seattle or something. And I was like, you know what? I'm going back to how I was when I came up. I'm just going to do my thing. We got a week left. Like, it's not going to get much worse. So I kind of just went back to that, and then I thought I finished pretty strong in the Seattle and San Francisco series. So for me, I kind of know what works for my swing. I've cleaned up some things here and there this offseason that we kind of talked about as I went into this offseason. But like I said, me being up there at the beginning and kind of the end, like I know what I have works in the big leagues, and this year I'm excited to stick with that every game through the struggles and not let things spiral like I did this past stint.
Right. Yeah. We hear so much from big league guys about the pressure to change something just because you've gotten up to the big leagues. And that pressure is definitely real. So that experience is totally understandable. But it's interesting to get your perspective on that, because it's like at the end of the day, you succeeded in the minor leagues and they called you up for that reason. And so it's that balance, right? I can imagine balancing that. Okay, I have things that I'm trying to improve, but at the same time, I don't want to change so much that I'm abandoning the identity that I had that got me promoted to this level, right? So
Yeah,
it's very, very interesting balance. But
it's
interesting
a
to hear.
fine line for sure. You don't want to get up there and then start changing everything that got you there in the first place, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's good that you're going into 2026 with that mindset. I guess at the same time, the final question I have for you is about 2026. Obviously, this team is in a unique position right now, kind of rebuilding a lot of things, new front office, new coaching staff, a lot of them. In 2026, there will be a lot of cultural change as much as there will be change in productivity on the field as guys try to practically get better at playing the game at the big league level. Is there anything that you are trying to bring to the team's culture in 2026?
I mean, for me, what I hope is kind of, I just felt like last year, like I said, I get called up. You know, I hadn't spent really any time with pretty much any of those guys on the team. Um, I hope that, and I feel like they were probably pretty connected. I think some of the younger guys just, I mean, it's tough to just like come in and be part of the group right away. Um, I hope that it's just a super connected group. I think that's when you all play your best. I know I've gotten along well with any team I've been on, and so I'm not too worried about that. And then I had a talk with our new hitting coach the other day, and he was kind of asking me a similar question on what I had like in hope, like what I want our team identity to be in 2026. And I was just thinking, I think without having kind of some of these superstars on our team, I think it provides an opportunity for us to all kind of believe in ourselves to be the guy, not just looking for someone else to get the big hit or start the rally or do something like that. I think we can get to a point where we can we can get a rally going from any point 1 through 9, or we can get that big hit any point in our lineup 1 through 9. And I definitely felt that last year. Sometimes I think we would go like 1, 2, 3 in the first inning, and then we all kind of look at each other and just kind of be waiting, like who's going to get the hit? Someone's got to get the hit. And I felt like no one really had the like the courage like for it to be them. You know what I'm saying? We were just kind of looking for someone else to do it. And I hope and I think that we're capable of everyone on our team being the guy and believing that they're the guy and believing that they can be the guy to get the hit. They can be the guy to start the rally. And I think that can be really powerful with with a younger group, everyone just believing in themselves a ton. And like it can't be fake. You can't just you can't just trick yourself into thinking it. It comes with, like I said, a lot about spring training. It comes with going through a spring training and earning that confidence that you're going to take into season. Whether it's practice, whether it's in-game stuff, whether it's in the gym. But I think that's the goal for this year, is to earn that confidence and take it into the big leagues, and be like we're here, we're big leaguers. Like we can come up with a big hit just like anyone else in this league.
Yeah, man. And there are a ton of awesome skill sets on this team, just from an on paper perspective. And so on Hoops and Homers, we've generally been more optimistic about the future of this team than most of Colorado Rockies fans. And so for me, just looking through that 40-man roster, especially at the hitters, there are a ton of awesome skill sets and a ton of young guys who should be in that position to feel like they can be the one to come through in those types of situations. And so
I think it's so much of like hitting in the big leagues is experience. And that's why I feel like you always just see these veterans coming through in like the bigger situations. And then if I feel like almost there's this narrative of like the younger guys aren't expected to come through. It's always like, oh no, like I felt myself feeling this. It's like, oh no, I'll let like good men get the hit. You know what I'm saying? Like, like I'm not supposed to get this big hit here. Like this is going to be like a Goodman situation. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like it's very realistic and very doable. It's going to take a lot of work, but I feel like we can squash that and genuinely believe in ourselves. And regardless of what your age is, how much time you have in the show, to believe in yourself and come through in those situations.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I think of like the 2010s baseball in general and like the postseason. It always felt like there was one of those quote unquote random young guys who came through in a very clutch situation. And so it's like, that's a great mentality to have if you're a younger guy who's not necessarily expected to succeed, quote unquote, in a particular situation, clutch situation or otherwise. So yeah, absolutely. It's great to hear that that's something you're bringing to the team and their culture in 2026. So we'll be very excited to see how 2026 is a year of this team taking steps forward. We appreciate you for hopping on the show, man. Appreciate you very much.
I'm very excited as well. I can't wait to get to spring and get it rolling.
Yeah, neither can we. All righty. Have a great season. Thank you for hopping on.
Thank you very much.
Guys, what a phenomenal final interview of our offseason here on Hoops and Homers. I love Kyle's perspective on stuff. Not just that he's fun to talk with, but his perspective on the game and his perspective on his approach to playing within the game. It's top tier. Okay, this is a guy who was drafted in the 5th round of 2023. He made his debut 2 years later. Okay, he made it through at least 4 different minor league ranks in 2 years. How do you do that? With this type of perspective. Okay, he's a leadership-focused kind of guy. He's a guy who doesn't just see what needs to be done, but who also sees the foundation of what we have to believe about ourselves in order to get stuff done. Okay, that's the telltale sign of a guy who can fly through the minors like Kyle did, and of a guy who can succeed at the major league level for a long time, like I think Kyle will. Okay, so I loved so many of the things that he said there. Even aside from his perspective, you can tell that he himself has a very solid confidence in his own skill set. Okay, he knows who he is as a ball player. He knows he's a good baseball player. And when he faces challenging circumstances, he's aware of it. He's like, wait a second. Okay, so I've never hit below 250 anywhere in my life, sarcastic or not. He's a good hitter. And then I got to the big leagues and it's like, pitchers weren't making mistakes, and it was harder for me to do that. And so it's like he recognizes the challenge because that's what people who are really skilled do. Game recognizes game. Okay, and so it's cool for him to see that challenge and recognize, oh wait, now I feel like I'm where I belong. I've reached where I am finally competing with the best of the best because I believe I can be best of the best. And I've demonstrated that at this point in my career. Love everything about his self-confidence. Love everything about what he's doing to get better so he can continue to compete with the best of the best. So much to like about Kyle's perspective on that. And man, you just love to see a guy who is contributing that to this current Rockies team as well. Okay. Like we've said multiple times, this is a critical turning point in the team's history, if you will. Okay, we're going to look back at 2026, and we're going to have a few thoughts about 2026 if we're looking back on this 10, 15 years in the future. Okay, I think this team can be good a lot sooner than people think. I agree with Warren Schaefer on that. Okay. And the reason I believe that is because I know we have guys like Kyle who have this perspective, who are very, whether it's someone like a Troy who's analytically driven, or someone like a Kyle who is very aware of what the whole picture looks like, who brings a leadership perspective and approach to the team, holding guys accountable, making them believe in themselves, whether it's someone like Braxton, who is also very intrigued at not only contributing positively to this team from an offensive perspective, but also managing the opponents as well, putting a fear into the teams that this team faces. Okay. There's so much to like about this crop of young guys that the Rockies have coming up right now, which is a great reason to be excited about their potential in the much sooner future than a lot of people realize. Okay. I also love the thing that Kyle said about stats. You know, he kind of just said it as a side tangent, but you know, the whole thing about seeing, oh, wait a second, I'm not hitting 300 anymore. I'm now hitting like 200 or 220 or 230, and it changes so rapidly. That's a guy who is aware of what his statistics are. Okay. And I note that because there are so many good athletes who don't really like to think about the stats, or at least that's what they'll claim, right? They'll claim, I don't really care about the stats too much. I just want to go out there and win. You know, it's what some good athletes have said. And so it's cool to me that Kyle is aware of his stats, because it means he's not scared of his performance. He doesn't let the stats impact his confidence. He lets his confidence impact his interpretation of the stats and what he needs to work on. Okay. That's what I take away from him saying something like that. That indicates he's watching this stuff. He's self-evaluating. Okay. He's taking feedback from others, obviously, from coaches, from players, like he mentioned as well, talking with our new hitting coach, Brett Pill, talking with guys like Hunter Goodman, Chase Dolander, getting all these different perspectives from all these different guys, but he's also getting his own feedback for himself from his own performance. And so it's a guy like this that is going to have to be the cornerstone of any Rockies turnaround in the next few years. And I think he will be. I think he will. Like we've said before, he's the only third baseman on the 40-man roster right now. I get the Rockies went out, signed Willie Castro earlier this week. We'll talk about this in a few weeks. We're not going to talk about that signing yet. But there will be competition for that starting third base spot because Willie can play third. But I would love to see Kyle win that job out of spring, because I think his perspective and his potential this season is something that this team really, truly could benefit from. And when we're looking back at this team in 4 or 5 years, about the period of time where I think that this team could be competitive, this is going to be the type of guy you look back and say, okay, he was a significant catalyst in reshaping this franchise's culture and this franchise's success in the long term. Okay, so I love everything about what I heard from Kyle Karros. Phenomenal interview. Great way to end our offseason interviews here on Hoops and Homers. And I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion just as much as I did. But that'll be it for me today. We will not be here with the stream next Saturday morning. We're going to take next week off. Rockies Fest is happening next Saturday, and my wife and I are going to go check it out, maybe interact with some players, interact with some other fans. We'll see who else is there. So we'll be getting some more info for you guys at that event next weekend. So no stream on January 24th, but we will be back the next Saturday. We're going to be talking about the Rockies, because spring training is right up on us now. We're less than a month away from pitchers and catchers. So we're going to give you the full overview of the Rockies' current state of the organization, 40-man roster, who is signed, who is traded for, who's not coming back in 2026, who is coming back from the 2025 team in 2026, and just what exactly can we expect from this Rockies team in the upcoming year. Got a lot of fun things to talk about with you guys. I hope you enjoyed the new presentation format and the things that we talked about with the Nuggets as well, getting into the numbers, seeing exactly what could change, what the Nuggets could benefit from. Hope you enjoyed that presentation as well. It's all part of what I'd like us to build here on Hoops and Homers, where we give you, the fan, a battlefield commander perspective on your Nuggets and your Rockies, meaning that you have all the relevant info available to you so that you can effectively cheer for your team, effectively make predictions about your team, and hold people like me who are talking about your favorite team accountable for our takes. And so I hope you enjoy that aspect of the show as well. We'll see you in a few weeks. Till then, have a phenomenal 2 weeks, and yeah, we'll talk soon.